Okay, so we're in the last stretch for theory for the year. This is Learning Unit 8 on social and ethical issues. It's kind of a little bit of a section that kind of just hangs on at the end. It's just a couple of things they kind of want you to know. It comprises sort of a smallish section, even going through to matric. You do a small section on this sort of social implications and ethical issues, and it covers just a small allocation of the marks towards the end. So I'm on page 100 in the book, and they're talking about here what are the economic reasons for using computers. Okay, that's pretty obvious. If you have a computer, obviously it's very obvious. It's very cost effective. It's very efficient. You could imagine, and it's not just computers as such. It's, there's also computer related fields, and there's sort of robotics. I mean, imagine trying to build motor cars on a production line if you did not have robotics or computers to help you out. Or even try and run any business. It doesn't matter what the business is. Even if you're an electrician or a bricklayer, you're going to have some sort of computer at home to do your accounting and your books and that sort of thing, or even if you're designing houses, to run CAD on or anything like that. So it's obviously, it saves so much work because it allows you to do stuff so much quicker. You can store information. These are all sort of economic reasons why it just makes sense to use computers. So they talk here about the digital divide. Yes, as I say in the book, you've got this divide between the haves and the have-nots. Okay, guys that have all the computer equipment and guys that have not. And there's a number of reasons for this digital divide, and as we go through these reasons, just think about even now. If we look at the situation that we find ourselves in now, where we're sort of stuck inside, us, and when I say us, I mean Gr10 and many of the other private schools, IB schools, are heavily into the remote learning thing now, as you should know by now. But I can assure you now that very few of the government schools are going to be doing this for any one or more reasons that we'll go through. Okay, so the kids that go to the government schools, they're literally just sitting at home now, and that means they're going to have big problems when it comes towards the end of the year, and they have to write their final exams and all sorts of things. Okay, so even now, just the situation we're in now is a perfect example of this so-called digital divide. So obviously we'll go through some of the reasons for that. The first one they say in the book is infrastructure. Infrastructure is just kind of relating to networking. How readily available is the internet in your area? Do you even have electricity at home? Some people won't even have electricity at home, so they won't be able to run a laptop or anything for any length of time. So it's not just computing infrastructure, it's just power as well. But I mean, even at Gr10, we feel that whole infrastructure thing. I mean, you've noticed yourself how slow the internet can be at Gr10 sometimes, because we're kind of in the bush there. There's no real solid internet network connection. I mean, here at home, my internet connection at home that I have just for myself here is the same speed as what the entire Gr10 school has got. Yeah, that's just my own connection here at home, just to give you some idea of sort of how slow and why it gets slow at Gr10. I mean, there you might have, when everyone's at school, more than 1,000 devices on that network. Everyone's phones are connected, all their laptops are connected, all the office machines are connected, and that's why it bottlenecks sometimes. Okay, so infrastructure is a problem. You can see there's some, sorry about that, my dogs are just barking, but someone obviously at the gate or something. So you can see there's some images there. They've shown you, these are quite old images, showing you the undersea cables that run between between the different continents and countries, and just kind of showing you where. If you look there, look at the amount of cables sort of running between New York and Europe. You know, that's huge. Hundreds of these things, tons of these cables. So there's so much bandwidth, you know, between sort of in the northern hemisphere. For us, our undersea cables kind of leave from two places here at Mtanzini, where I am, is one of them. And we have the sort of the East Coast cable goes up here, travels up the sort of the edge of the coast, up the edge of the continent, until it gets towards the Gulf of Aden. The cable splits there. Half of it goes to India. The other half turns up the Gulf of Aden, through the Suez Canal, and then through onto Malta and onto Spain and onto Europe. So that's sort of the East Coast cable. Then there's a West Coast cable that leaves the country sort of near Cape Town and goes up the West Coast towards Cape Verde Islands, and then onto Spain from there. So there's sort of at least there's a couple of cables, but which is nice to have a couple of cables, because obviously if a cable gets broken, and they do break, we had one a little while ago, or two of them a little while ago, they get busted by trawlers and ships that drag their anchor and all sorts of things, might break the cable. And then you can imagine what a mission it is to go and pick that cable up off the bottom of the sea to rejoin it. So it takes a while. So you can see there's that's part of the infrastructure, how these continents are connected. The other thing as well with infrastructure, it's not just the cables, it's literally the devices. And you can see on the next page now, I'm on page 102, there are some, there's a graph there of sort of how many computers there are per 100 people, sort of in developed nations, and versus sort of emerging countries is much lower. You know, the density of computers, you can imagine throughout Central African countries, is going to be way lower than it would be in South Africa, or even sort of in North America or Europe. Okay, so it's just literally how many devices there are, and you're going to find in African countries that there's tons of phones. Okay, it's not as many computers, but tons of phones. Okay, so in South Africa, I mean, we think, okay, we're quite good with cell phone structure, for example, but in fact, there's some other African countries that have got us beaten. You know, sort of even countries like Kenya, for example. Kenya, I have something like 5 or 6 cell phone companies covering Kenya, whereas we've kind of got 2.5 maybe, if we're lucky. Okay, and that's just a need, you know, because not many people have computers. So many more have got cell phones. They've got to cover that cell phone. And you're going to find now with like Elon Musk with Starlink, you know, he's launching all these satellites now, 30,000 satellites in low Earth orbit. Rural areas are going to be better served for internet access. So it will get better over the next couple of years. I can assure you that. Okay. Obviously, another reason is poverty. Some people just literally don't have the money to buy these devices. Okay, so that's a big thing. Education, you might have the device, but you don't know how to use it. Okay, so that's another thing. It's a problem. And obviously, political issues. I mean, you can imagine if you lived somewhere like, I don't know, Somalia or some of these African countries where there's kind of Sudan, South Sudan, these places where there's, and you know, and Ethiopia and Eritrea, kind of where they've had these wars that have been going on for years. That's political issues can be a bit of a problem. That there's not as many computers and that sort of thing in those sort of areas where there's heavy unrest. Bridging the divide, you can have a look through that. It's quite difficult because you've got these huge problems to overcome. Okay, ergonomics, fancy words. Ergonomics deals with it's the science. It's the science of the sort of the human computer interface. Okay, so that is ergonomics. Okay, you can just read through that, and it's showing you there the proper way to sit in front of your computer. And what they're covering now is, just excuse me a second. Sorry about that. Okay, so obviously using computers, there are sort of health issues that we've got to watch out for. They talked about text messaging. Text messaging is a very, very small movements of just your thumbs. So you're not getting much blood moving at all. And you can end up with what they call a sore thumb syndrome. You can get repetitive strain injuries. You can read through that as well, RSI. A very common one is carpal tunnel syndrome. Carpal tunnel syndrome is you get in your hand, and it's because your hand is over the mouse all the time. And it's kind of a disease that attacks the tendons in your hand from using a mouse too much. Carpal tunnel syndrome. Eye strain is another one. Sometimes you're looking at the same image on your computer all the time for hours and hours. So your eyes not focusing to infinity, and you end up like for instance me, I wear glasses simply because of years and years and years of using computers. And what happens is your eye muscles become too strong because they're used to focusing close. So your eye muscles become too strong, and you then battle to focus further back. So things that are a long way away, you can sometimes battle to read. Okay, and also sometimes you can be in bad lighting. So that's another thing you got to watch out with computers. So if you're on your computer, what you want to do is just look up from time to time, let your eye relax, look at something infinity, let your eyes relax. That's what you've got to keep an eye on. Okay, 8.4, they cover green computing. That's obviously something nowadays that's quite a big thing. And it's particularly electrical. The green computing part is electrical consumption. Okay, you want to try and they build computers nowadays to try and use as little power as possible. So it's all to do with using power. And they say there that computers are using between 5 to 10% of the entire world's electricity. It's probably not far off. It might even be a bit more than that. Who knows? The second thing to do with green computing is obviously how to dispose of this equipment, especially laptops. The big problem with laptop is, well, there's two problems really. It's all the plastic that's in it. It's one thing. And the other thing, which is quite a big problem as well, of course, is the battery. Because a lot of the batteries, especially some of the older batteries, had heavy metals in them, particularly lithium. A lot of them were lithium ion batteries or nickel metal hydride batteries. So you've got to be, so that's the problem with these batteries. Have got very unfriendly chemistry. So you've got to be ways that you dispose of them. You've seen yourself. You might have seen this before in science. If they haven't done it for you yet, they certainly will do it for you. What happens if you actually drop lithium into, they normally drop it into a bowl of water, but essentially they're exposing it to oxygen, and it's very, very reactive. It catches fire near instantaneously. You'll see they'll do it for sodium and lithium. Lithium more reactive than sodium. Okay, so it's the disposal of stuff. Okay, so that is it for the theory. Okay, for grade 10. Very short section. Let me just finish the recording here.